All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So glad for you to join us for our second in our series of counselor webinars here during College Exploration Month. My name is Jason C. I am excited to be joined this morning. My colleague Annie Trout, my colleague Felicia Orr is with us, and I want to say our special guest is Jenna McCall, who, for those of you many of you know Jana. Anytime you see Jana on a webinar with myself, Felicia, Annie, that means we're going to talk a little bit about the dual enrollment grant. All right. So without further ado, this is being recorded as always. As soon as we are finished and the recording processes, we will get that out to everyone. Moreover, next week we will send this out statewide to all of our counselors and educators. So hopefully they take advantage of this wonderful presentation. To avoid a little clunkiness, because this morning's webinar is about our FAST system, which is the new e-grants, and also a state aid legislation recap from last spring. We did a webinar back in May. Some of you perhaps joined, some of you perhaps have watched, but just in case, because May is such a busy time of the year, we wanted to weave that into this morning's presentation as well. But to avoid clunkiness, because I've got slides, I do actually want to show FAST live just for a second. Always a little dangerous when you go live, right, and show something in real time. But I'm going to share my screen, Google Chrome, share. So this is the FAST system. When we get into the slides, I will get into how you get here, how you log in, this, that, and the other. But just for a second, one thing you will notice as we transition from eGrants, the old site where counselors would go and pull reports, enter GPAs for Hope Scholarship purposes, FAST does all of that as well. Basically, we just gave eGrants a facelift. We rebranded, we renamed. It's now called FAST, which stands for the Financial Aid System of Tennessee. When you log in, this is your real-time dashboard from a high school counselor perspective. You see your quote counts for your verified and verified students. So these are your students who are pending Hope Scholarship GPA verification, right? In this case, if you hover over, this shows at this particular school that 73 students have been verified. That means these students have, you've entered their final GPA for them, or they may have already qualified for Hope based on a 21 ACT. If you have any, this is something to remind all of you. If you log into FAST, and if you're looking at this verified count, if you see any, if you see a bar there, right, a colored bar right there, then I would encourage you to go up to verification and click verify students, and this will bring you to your screen where you can enter a GPA for any student that requires GPA verification. Here's the thing, folks, you know, how students populate this list. One, they have to complete the FAFSA. Two, their ACT must marry with their FAFSA. And many of you remember some of the issues that we had receiving test results from ACT last academic year. There may be some students that just completed the FAFSA back in July or August as they approach the September 1 FAFSA deadline for Hope Scholarship purposes. And therefore, they may have populated your verify screen and may need that final GPA entered to establish eligibility if they had a 3.0 or better for Hope, or from a GAMS perspective, if they had a 3.75 along with that 29 ACT. So again, when you log into your FAST, if you see, quote, a colored horizontal bar of any showing any quote verify students, this means you've got students that need GPA verification. Um, then you have eligible students by program. This looks year over year over year. This looks for at the class of 21 versus the class of 20. So this is just a quick overview for the class of 20. This school, which is Clark Range over in Fenchurch County, had 37 Hope eligible students. They had 20 Wilder NAFE eligible students, and they had 43 TSAA eligible students, right? And so when we begin loading the 22-23 FAFSA later this semester, then this for 2022, this will start showing vertical bar lines as well. And then you have the quote pie over here, and the pie shows you dollar amounts in terms of by programs, specifically for the class of 21 right now. The other thing, I think this was neat because as we put together today's presentation, Felicia, Jana, Annie, and myself, we primarily live on the agency side of FAST, which I want to say looks different than the high school side in some ways. And this really was good for me to experience the high school side because I had not noticed this until a week or two ago. Right up here, notice this dashboard you see right now is related to your TELS programs and TSCA, but you also have a little tab for Tennessee Promise. And so in real time, if you click Tennessee Promise, this shows you as of this moment, vertical bar graph of your Promise application. So at Clark Range, Ms. K, who always rocks it, already has 65 of her seniors who have completed the Tennessee Promise application already this fall prior to the November 1st deadline. So this is a real-time, quick, overview of programs, which I think is really, really cool. I just wanted to take the time to show you, again, in real time, as opposed to just using slides for this. So I am now going to stop sharing, and now I'm going to go and share our slides for today. And again, today's presentation is about FAST and also that state aid update. As you heard me say earlier, FAST, the financial aid system of Tennessee, is the quote new e-grants. If you are a new counselor and you never used e-grants, don't worry about it, right? You're only going to know FAST, the financial aid system of Tennessee. The biggest improvement between the old system and the new system is, folks, yay, amen, finally, you can use FAST with any modern web browser. So if you are a Chrome school, if you're a Safari school, if you're an Edge school, now FAST is fully supported with these systems. And I think what's funny is we've had some counselors that have tried to use FAST within Internet Explorer, and well, guess what? That's the one browser that is not supporting FAST, right? Which is the joke where used to, for eGrants, you had to use Internet Explorer. But again, for those of us, and you saw me earlier, I was in Google Chrome. If you have Chrome, Safari, Edge on your desktop or laptop, you will be able to access FAST through it. For those of you that haven't quite transitioned from eGrants to FAST, as a reminder, your eGrants login is your FAST login. So if you have written down your old eGrants username and password that potentially you used in May or June to verify GPAs for Hope scholarship purposes, because we did hear some feedback at that point in time, Jason, we want to use the old system because we know it. We were like, all right, you can do that. Just FYI, at this point in time, go ahead, make that leap. Let's start using FAST, and your login from eGrants will allow you to log in at FAST. The website is fast.tn.gov. So when you go to fast.tn.gov, here's the login screen. So for those of you who are listening right now and are thinking, wow, Jason, hold on a second. I don't have a username password for any system that you guys utilize. Well, I've got you. Here's a QR code. If you use it, this will open the high school user request form. And this form can be completed and scanned and emailed to our colleague Journey Ellison. All this is on the form, and this is how you can have an account created if you do not already have an account. Now, as a reminder, for those of you longtime users or first-time users, have you forgot your password? If you have, all right, you need to guess at it until you become locked out. Now, we have dedicated staff in the office that constantly monitors accounts, and they should email you a temporary password in 5 to 10 minutes, right? Now, oftentimes, what's funny is what I see, and I think Annie, Felicia, Jan, and I, we'd all say, you can email us. But here's what we see oftentimes is by the time you email me and I look at the accounts, you've already been unlocked by one of our other colleagues. So kind of as a reminder, if you have forgotten your password, again, guess until you're locked out. And then if I were you, I might wait 5 minutes to see if I automatically get a temporary password. That may come from DeWallace or Ellison. Heck, it could come from me, Jana, etc. At that point in time, if you haven't received it, then I would email one of us. And again, at the end of this presentation, you will have our contact information. Cameron, I saw your question. Great question. Here's the thing, and Jana, I may ask you to chime in here if you have any wisdom after I finish with this slide. But once you log in, if you haven't registered your computer, you will get this pop-up screen, which will ask for a registration code. This is where you will be emailed a special registration code that you will then copy and paste into the box. In theory, if you check that little box to register your computer, this will allow you to skip this step the next time. However, and Cameron, you asking that question, I think one thing we've learned, right, there's some of you from a school and school district perspective that every night you automatically clear your cache, your temporary files automatically, like your IT does that. Folks, if that happens, then you're going to have to do this registration every time, right? Or at least every day if you're logging in once a day, if that is the practice within your IT department. Jana, if you will chime in here, any other thoughts about the registration codes? Because I myself have noticed at times I've had to maybe do this step more than I used to. What have you heard or what?
Fast, for whatever reason, they haven't quite been able to determine the reason, but Fast does reset every so often, and they have been working on trying to figure out the exact reason behind it, but it does basically take the registration down every, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So it's like maybe every 2 or 3 weeks or so you may have to re-register. But I was going to say, like you said, that if your system is automatically set to clear, the cache or the cookies, it's going to take that registration out, and you're going to have to do it every time you log in.
Yeah, thanks, Jana. So Cameron, hey, we experience as well, just like you do, and so just understand. I mean, specifically, if that is what your school and school district's IT is doing, that's one reason you're having to do it maybe every day. And again, as Jana said, the other reason may simply be the fact that our IT team, the system is designed right now where it is having you to do that more frequently. I will say, because anytime I do a presentation like this, right, I mean, I study my craft, right? This is my job. So I study my craft. I review my slides to prep for this presentation. And interestingly, this morning, I was asked to register my computer, I think 4 times when logging in and out of Fast. So folks, it happens. Guys, first and foremost, we're just trying to protect the data that we have. And as a reminder, that data includes social security numbers of your students. So that's why, I'm all right with us being a little bit perhaps more protective because of the security of those social security numbers. So that said, we already showed this a little bit about the dashboard when you initially log in. Today I really wanted to talk about reports, right? And specifically, we are in Promise application season, and I know a lot of you have already downloaded your reports or are downloading them every day. But for those of you that maybe you haven't gotten around to beginning Promise application workshops, as we get near to that November 1 deadline, here's how you would pull your Tennessee Promise report within the FAST system. All right. As I go through these instructions, here's another QR code that opens up the written instructions of how to pull the Tennessee Promise report. At the top of the screen, you will click Reports. This will then bring you to this screen as you see right here. Notice you have a couple tabs that are highlighted in blue. In this case, to find the Promise report, you will click on the High School tab, which will bring you to this page. And at this point in time, you will simply click on the Tennessee Promise report. And that will open your Tennessee Promise report where you can choose to save and what type, which we'll see here on the next slide. Folks, annual reminder, all right, for our Promise applicants, please, please, please use that Tennessee Promise report to track both Promise submission and FAFSA submission specifically for your Promise applicants, okay? Use that Promise report. You see right above it, those of you watching obviously on your computer screens, right above it, there's a FAFSA by high school report. There is this idea that once we get past the Promise application deadline, oh, we need to start looking at our FAFSA by high school report. Again, for Promise applicants, use that Tennessee Promise report to track both Promise and FAFSA submissions, specifically for that population. And for the majority of us in our high schools, that's really probably the report that you really only need to use, assuming you have, basically 100% of your students who are, quote, eligible for Promise, applying for Promise, right? As a reminder, just to say something about the FAFSA by high school report, students populate it as the ACT record matches with their FAFSA. Again, as a reminder, last year, what issue did we have? We had the issue ourselves, meaning TSAC, with receiving ACT results from ACT. And for the majority of the year, all the way up until about April, we had received 0 ACT records, basically. And so that FAFSA by high school ACT report was essentially useless. So again, for your Promise applicants, and I think at most schools that you're having 100% of your eligible students completing the Promise application, really the most important report for you to pull is that Promise report, which will allow you to track both Promise and FAFSA submission. Now, once you click Tennessee Promise report, you will see this screen. Guys, as a reminder, you got to think in terms from a Promise perspective. Think in terms of the academic year in which your students will use Promise. Thus, you will need to select 22-23 to pull the Promise report for your current seniors. Again, you will select the 22-23 academic year to pull the Promise report for current high school seniors. Once you select 22-23, you'll click View Report. This screen will then appear with your report, with your names. This is where you will now click that little diskette, right? For those of us who remember the old disk where we used to save our documents onto back in the day. Anyways, if you click that, this will allow you to select the program in which you want to save your Promise report to. So for example, if you want to save it to your PDF, then you will select PDF. Excel, you will select Excel, etc., etc. Now, once you select PDF, notice that screen. Let me do this one more time. Notice the little screen at the bottom will kind of pop up. This will show the files that have now been downloaded. All right. You can then click on one of the files to then open it from there, as you see here. Let's say you want to open the Excel version, and you would simply click that Excel sheet, and that will then open your Excel spreadsheet. Notice at this point in time, Jana, Jason, and Annie all have completed the Tennessee Promise application. So if their names appear, then they've at least satisfied step one, which is to submit the Tennessee Promise application. However, missing on this spreadsheet, I love the fact that Felicia's joined us, so I'm going to use her as an example. Missing from this spreadsheet is Felicia Orr, right? If Felicia is not appearing, then most likely you should assume she hasn't submitted the promise application. Now, if she logs in, or if any student, you have them to log in, and if they prove to you otherwise, and specifically whether they log back into the portal account, or remember, when you submit the promise application, you are sent, the student, a confirmation email from us saying you've successfully submitted your promise app. Let's say in this example, Felicia shows you that she has a confirmation email. Well, what that may mean then in that case is perhaps the student accidentally selected the wrong high school, right? Yesterday, I had a counselor from Whitehaven High School reach out to Felicia and I and say, hey, this student has an email saying that he or she has completed the application, but he or she's not on the report. Can you look? Felicia looked in the system, and what the student had accidentally done is had selected White County High School. Folks, it happens, right? And that's an easy fix on our end where we can update the high school if that is the case, right? Now, we've retooled this promise report this year. Many of you, if you remember last year, for some reasons, some of the information like meeting, community service, FAFSA college was left off the report. Honestly, we don't really know why, but it's back this year, right? As you see. Now, as of right now, because we have not started downloading FAFSAs, all we have for this report is if the name appears, that means they've submitted the promise application. As a reminder, right, we do not typically begin downloading FAFSA data until November. So we're a week away from the opening of the 22-23 FAFSA. Shameless plug, next Friday, I'll be leading a 22-23 FAFSA presentation during this hour. That said, as you have students that begin completing the FAFSA as early as next Friday, the following week, folks, again, we do not begin downloading FAFSAs typically until November. That means any FAFSA submitted in October most likely will not appear on a report until we begin downloading the FAFSA data. Here's what we always do. My team, Felicia, Annie, myself, and our colleagues, we will email you out. We will email you to let you know when we begin downloading FAFSA data. That will be your key to know that now, at that point in time, if it's November the 6th when we begin downloading FAFSA data, if we email you that, then from February 6th on, for example, you should begin seeing these other columns, specifically the FAFSA-related columns. You will begin seeing data in them for those students that have completed the 22-23 FAFSA. The other reminder here, as we spend a little time on this screen, one second, guys. The other thing I just want to remind you from a promise perspective, if you're having a workshop today, for example, right, and you have 60 kids complete the promise application, right, instantaneously, those students should appear on a report. In other words, at the end of the day, if you pull a report, all 60 who completed the application should appear. From a FAFSA perspective, once we begin downloading FAFSAs, as a reminder, it takes at least 3 days typically for a FAFSA to process, which means typically we will not receive that FAFSA until the 4th or 5th day once it's been processed, okay? So again, let's fast forward to November. Let's assume we are now downloading the 22-23 FAFSA records, okay? Let's say a student completes the application on November the 15th. Well, it takes 3 days to process. So 16, 17, 18. What that means is that record won't hit our report most likely until the 19th or the 20th. Okay. That's how it's always been, right? And so that's just a reminder as you use the promise report to track FAFSA submission on down on into the semester. So let's transition into a state aid legislation recap for a bit. All right. Now, QR code on this screen will open a one-pager of a review of all of the legislation that passed that impacts our financial aid programs. Okay. So, a couple things on this slide. First, middle college scholarship. Not many of you participate in middle college scholarship, but it increased the award from 1,000 to 1,250 a semester. That became effective this academic year, 21-22. William R. Moore College of Technology is now a participant for dual enrollment grant purposes. That also became effective this current academic year. Last week, those of you who joined us, we talked about state aid and gave a thorough overview of our lottery scholarship programs, Tennessee Promise, and some of our other state funded programs like the Hope Foster Child Tuition Grant. You know, one of the things I introduced with the Hope Foster Child Tuition Grant was that for students who are Hope eligible and that were in foster care for 1 year at age 14 or thereafter, right, they would be eligible for Hope Foster Child Tuition Grant. Well, with a change in legislation that was passed, a student who, after reaching the age of 17, is placed in state custody. All right. At that point in time, if that student is Hope eligible, even if they were placed in state custody for 5 days at age 17, this student would also be now eligible for Hope Foster Child Tuition Grant. So in other words, for that age 17 student, that student would not have to be enrolled 365 consecutive days for Hope Foster Child Tuition Grant purposes. Jana, correct me. I believe you are an administrator for this program. Anything else you want to add here regarding Hope Foster Child Tuition Grant?
No, I think you covered the basics, other than to reiterate that the students do have to be Hope eligible to be eligible for the foster child tuition grant. So that's one of the biggest issues with this program, is that they do first have to be Hope eligible.
Thank you. That sounds great. Or thank you for saying that, or in reiterating that point. Other state aid legislative changes impacting homeschool students. This also includes our Category 4 private high school students. So for Felicia, right, that would be Gateway Christian. For me, that's JECA, Jonathan Edwards Classical Academy, Home Life Academy, right? Some of these schools that are categorized as Category 4, these changes impact them as well. The bill here removed the requirement that homeschool students and students graduating from a Category 4 private high school must be enrolled for 1 year prior to high school graduation for Hope purposes. So that 1 year requirement is now removed. So essentially now, a student in theory that, let's say, begins the senior year of high school at Marion County High School, for example, but then transfers into a homeschool program, that student can now qualify for Hope if they achieve, for example, a 21 ACT. Whereas back in the day, if they did that midstream during their senior year, that student would never be considered for Hope purposes because they would have been enrolled for 1 full year. Again, that 1 year requirement has been removed for homeschool and Category 4 private high school grads. It also eliminated the intent to homeschool notification requirement for Hope and Promise purposes. This was a requirement for such students at some homeschool programs, right? So again, to be clear, this removes that requirement for hope and promise purposes. Folks, it still may be a requirement from a DOE perspective, a Department of Education perspective. If student leaves public high school, transfers into a private category 4 or a homeschool, right? That still may be a requirement for that, but specifically for hope and promise eligibility purposes, we've eliminated the intent to homeschool notification requirement. Finally, homeschool students now, right? Historically, they've only been able to qualify for HOPE based on a 21 ACT composite or an SAT equivalent. But with the new legislation, homeschool students, category 4 private high school grads that are dual enrolled, if they complete at least 2 dual enrollment classes totaling at least 6 hours and achieve, notice what I've underlined and bolded, at least a 3.0 in each of the 2 dual enrollment classes, they can qualify for HOPE through that path. Now, what's key here is that at least 3.0 in each of the 2 DE classes, dual enrollment classes. Let me translate that. If I am a homeschool student, and if I only take 2 dual enrollment classes as a junior and senior, I've got to have a B in both classes, right? A B in both would make me HOPE eligible regardless of my ACT score. Now, if I'm a homeschool student that elects to take 3 dual enrollment classes, 4, 5, 6, whatever it may be, then in that case, you simply have to have a cumulative 3.0 dual enrollment GPA in, quote, all dual enrollment classes. Jana, again, because it's dual enrollment, I'm going to pause here for a second. If you have anything else to add here from this perspective.
This does not change dual enrollment eligibility for homeschool students. That has been questioned. This new legislation just affects homeschool students qualifying for the HOPE scholarship. It does not change their requirement for receiving the additional courses to be paid for under the dual enrollment grant.
Jana, again, thank you. All right, last slide before we get into the good stuff, meaning the dual enrollment grant. Other changes, there were some revisions made to the Helping Heroes grant, I believe adding some additional medals that would allow some of our men and women potentially to gain eligibility for the Helping Heroes grant. Folks, that's typically more of a, I'm going to call it an adult program, right, for our men and women who have served our country. So again, if you interact with any parents or former students that have served in the military, that is a program that could help them with their college education here in Tennessee. There was a bill that also created completion grants for promise students who have financial hardship. So specifically for promise students who are in college, right? Utilizing Tennessee Promise, there was some completion grants created to potentially help some students that had a financial hardship, had something come up all of a sudden that perhaps could place a barrier in front of them, allowing them to complete a semester or even complete their degree program. Here's why I shared the state aid legislation, specifically this one here, is our partner organizations, the AIRS Foundation, Tennessee Achieves, they're the ones that are administering these this pot of money. And what I would encourage you as high school counselors, educators, if you have a former student that reaches out to you, maybe they come back and ask you for help on the FAFSA, right? And if they share that they're struggling with something financial, what I would encourage you to do is encourage them, say, hey, reach out to the financial aid office at that local TCAT or that local community college. Because, again, there has been some money set aside potentially that they could access to help them with a financial hardship. If for some reason they run into a dead end at the college level, again, Tennessee Achieves and the Ayers Foundation are the partner organizations who are actually administering this money. In this case, Mike Meadows of the Ayers Foundation definitely is a contact. I actually spoke with him earlier, and he said, Jason, when you talk to counselors today about this, to say if you are in Ayers County, if you work with Ayers within your district, then Mike can definitely be your contact person for any students that have run into a financial hardship. I'm going to reach out to Achieves to see who their go-to is on their team. As many of you know, our longtime colleague Amanda Snyder recently left Achieves, and now Jessica Macy is their communications person. If nothing else, Jessica might be the go-to person, at least right now. But we'll figure that out. Or if you run into, again, a former student who's using Promise, that's maybe encountering a financial hardship, and you're like, Jason, who do I contact that maybe Achieves to for more information? Again, either reach out to Jessica Macy, or, as always, folks, reach out to someone on our team when we can connect you to Achieves and go that route if we need. And then finally, the exciting legislative quote change was that the dual enrollment grant, specifically grants 3 and 4, would increase effective January 1st to pay for tuition and mandatory fees, specifically at a TCAT or community college. Again, this is effective January 1. We've had several other webinars, videos, email communication, communicating this. But guys, it's busy. We're busy. And you may have missed some of that. So if you did, this is why we're going to take the time to go through this. And this is why I have my right-hand person, Jana, to interject at any time here. So let's go through dual enrollment grant, the Give dual enrollment grant. QR code on the screen. This will kind of just open up a one-pager that we're going to use at Scally. For those of you that are attending Scally this upcoming week, you're going to see a lot of these slides again, in addition to this one pager that outlines what you need to know as you navigate the grant process and the grant rules and regulations. So from a dual enrollment grant perspective, as a reminder, student must be a high school junior or senior to qualify for, quote, one award during a semester. That student must simply satisfy the admissions criteria set by the dual enrollment college for dual enrollment purposes, right? There is a myth here that you've got to be Hope eligible, all right? Now, again, maybe some colleges require you to dual enroll to have a 3.0 GPA or 21 ACT. So if that's the case, then in theory, yeah, you do have to be Hope eligible for those colleges. But folks, there are some colleges for dual enrollment purposes that now only require 2.75, right? So again, as a reminder, to be eligible for one grant, you simply must satisfy the admissions criteria set forth by the college. Once you receive the grant, to retain eligibility semester to semester, you must maintain a cumulative 2.75 GPA. Jana, I always like to use this as an example. Folks, what this means, if I am a junior taking my first dual enrollment class right now this fall, I'm in that one class, right? Since I have to maintain a 2.75 cumulative GPA, what that means essentially this semester is I've got to have a B or better, because that GPA is reviewed at the end of each term. Give dual enrollment grant. This is the program that began last year. And, for many of us, because of the 2021 academic year, some of you may have missed the introduction of the Give dual enrollment grant. Give, the acronym, stands for the Governor's Investment in Vocational Education. Again, this is a, quote, special dual enrollment grant for high need courses. Notice in quotes, high need courses and programs leading to a certificate or diploma. We'll talk a little bit about, or I'll point you to where those programs and courses are here momentarily. But here's the biggest point, right? Everything that we talked about dual enrollment grant beyond the quote high need courses and programs apply here for GIVE. You've got to be a junior or senior in high school. You must satisfy whatever the admissions criteria set forth by that dual enrollment college for GIVE is. And in order to retain grant eligibility, again, you've got to maintain that 2.75 cumulative dual enrollment GPA semester after semester. This is where I'm gonna now present these two programs now together, because frankly, folks, this is how you need to view these programs, right? So reminders, the combination of these programs, if you have a student that's taken, say, 2 dual enrollment classes during a semester, or 1 dual enrollment grant course, 1 GIVE eligible course, in order to qualify for more than 1 grant a semester, first and foremost, student, you've got to be HOPE eligible, okay? And now students are able to access up to 3 grants during a semester, okay? The other change that happened at the beginning of the 2021 academic year is we expanded a student's total number of grants from 8 to 10. So over the course of their junior and senior years, right, they can now receive up to 3 a semester and up to 10 total spanning their junior and senior years. And folks, that can come in various combinations. Some students, maybe they only want to use their quote 4 traditional dual enrollment grants, maybe 1 a semester, right? That's fine. Maybe for these students that are GIVE eligible, and for students that might be thinking about a TCAP program, right? Who otherwise may not be doing the traditional dual enrollment course, perfect. This is what I think the beauty of the GIVE dual enrollment grant program is. It's going to expose college and students to courses that may ultimately lead them to a certificate or diploma program at a TCAP or even at a community college. So if they want to do 1 GIVE course and utilize 1 GIVE grant a semester, that's perfect. For those students that are HOPE eligible and can receive more than 1 grant a semester, right? They can obviously use 10 dual enrollment grants, or they can do some combination of, let's say, 6 dual enrollment grants and 4 GIVE grants. So folks, there's various combinations that a student can utilize traditional dual enrollment grant and GIVE, but understand it's one in the same, right? It's all coming from that total 10 grant lifetime max that a student has at their disposal. Janet, before I go to the next slide, anything you want to add or even clarify at this point?
Nope, you covered it pretty well. Again, just to reiterate though that dual enrollment and GIVE are still it's still dual enrollment money. It's still coming from the same pot of money. They are not 2 separate programs. The GIVE just gives students those additional monies for the high need or the high demand courses.
Perfect. Let's talk about the application process. As she just said, to reiterate, one and the same. So the dual enrollment grant application is the same as the GIVE dual enrollment grant application. It's one and the same. The 21-22 application is available now via the TSAC student portal. You see on the right-hand side of the screen the appropriate deadlines. Over the last few weeks, we've been peppering school counselors with reminders about the 2-year, 4-year deadline, which was, guys, I believe that was last week, September 15th. But obviously that deadline for the fall term has now come and gone. But specifically for your students that are considering maybe a fall trimester or a winter trimester, well, I should say, a fall trimester course at a TCAT. As a reminder, their deadline's not until November 1st. So your TCAT students still have time. If they're in a fall trimester dual enrollment course, they still have time to complete the 21-22 dual enrollment application for fall trimester purposes. For spring, looking forward, again, the spring term deadline is not until February 1 for 2-year, 4-year dual enrollment colleges, and then March 1 for TCAP colleges. So guys, understand, sometimes some schools have like all their students maybe at the beginning of the semester Or here's a pro tip. If you know in the spring what students are taking dual enrollment next fall, go ahead and then complete the application at that point in time for all those students. But that being said, for those of you that have students complete the application, let's say in August as a return, specifically for those students that do dual enrollment in the fall, for those students that do it in the spring, understand the application now is for the academic year. So if a student applied, in this case, prior to September 15th for fall payment, that 21-22 application also serves spring 22 and summer 22. So as we move into spring, the only students that would need to complete the 21-22 dual enrollment grant application for spring purposes would be those students who did not do it already for fall, right? So in other words, if you have a student that all of a sudden wants to take a class, let's say beginning in January, then you just need to have them to complete the dual enrollment grant application by the February 1st deadline to get that spring payment. Also, we get this question a lot. If dual enrolled at 2 colleges the same semester, guys, you've got to complete a consortium agreement, or the student must have a consortium agreement completed between those institutions. So our advice, have the student to contact the financial aid office at the primary dual enrollment college, to begin that consortium agreement process, right? Oftentimes you have a student, I'm going to use Ball State as an example. You have a student that's going to semester in, semester out, take at least one class at Ball State. But maybe there's a one-off that the student chooses to take a dual enrollment course through Union University there in Hendersonville, or shout out to TCAT Hartsville, right? And Kevin Harrison for a second. Maybe they're wanting to do a one-off course through TCAT Hartsville. Well, in that case, if I'm traditionally taking classes at Ball State, I'm going to approach Ball State and ask their financial aid about a consortium, so that may allow them to pay that student a grant that they can also use at TCAT Hartsville during the same semester. Janet, anything to add here about the application process or the consortium?
I think you covered that one pretty well. The consortium agreements do get confusing sometimes, but those do go through the financial aid offices at both of the institutions.
And Janet, I'm covering this well because you have taught me all of this, and I appreciate you so much. So let's move on. Now let's talk about the amounts. So beginning January 1, this was recently decided upon what the new amounts would be from a dual enrollment grant / give perspective. So notice 2-year, 4-year grants 1, 2, 3, and 4 beginning January will all be up to $513, right? From a TCAP perspective, they'll be up to $399. But folks, once the student gets into grants 5 through 10, understand those grants will be paid at up to $100 per credit hour, or whatever that looks like from a clock hour perspective, right? Also $100 per clock hour range is how I typically teach that. I guess the one caveat, or actually 2 caveats here, as a reminder, anytime a student begins using the 5th through 10th grant, folks, monies received, grants 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, those are going to be subject to a one-time Hope Scholarship reduction, okay? Second caveat, okay? Let's go back to that Ball State example a second ago. Let's say junior year, student takes their general ed dual enrollment classes, right? 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring, English 1, English 2, psychology, history, right? Those are your traditional dual enrollment grants that are covered by the traditional dual enrollment grant. But now we get into this senior year, and all of a sudden, they want to explore some of these give eligible courses and programs, right? So at that point in time, if they're on their 5th, 6th grant, etc., if it's give eligible and they've not used one of their 4 give eligible grants, then those give grants will supersede the up to $100 per credit hour, right? So give funding for your high need courses, again, can be awarded at any time within the 10 grant limit. But again, to be clear, if it's grants 5, 6, etc., money received will be deducted one time from that initial Hope Scholarship. Folks, listen, we understand, and I think we have some of our Pathways colleagues join us today. Shout out to Tracy if she's online. Shout out to Ellen if she's online. Um, Guys, we all know this working with school counselors. Guys, this can be really confusing. It can, and sometimes the best thing to do is present us the scenario and then let us kind of map it out for you. That's sometimes the best advice I can give. Again, Jenna, again, I may have covered that well, but just in case you add anything, chime in here if you don't mind.
I think you got it. That is the give amounts and the new amounts for courses 3 and 4 have definitely been a topic of lots of conversations with different folks throughout our agency. So I think you got it covered there, Jason.
Sounds good. All right, now we're going to talk about the dual enrollment grant give application report. So similar to the FAFSA, or excuse me, similar to FAFSA as well, but similar to Tennessee Promise, right? You do have an application report for dual enrollment grant purposes via FAST, where you can track submission, and many of you have been doing that leading up to the September 15th to your 4-year fall payment deadline. And I would encourage you guys, to track that. Make sure these students have submitted the grant so that they're not surprised and end up having to pay. Because folks, if they miss the deadline, they've missed a deadline, right, for grant purposes. So the other thing to tackle on the screen right quick, we get this a lot. Jason, Jana, Annie, Felicia, what if a student becomes ineligible for the grant because they have not satisfied the 2.75 dual enrollment GPA? Can they still get the Hope Scholarship? The answer is yes, right? Remember, Hope Scholarship is based on a 21 ACT composite or a 3.0 final cumulative GPA. For districts that have multiple GPAs calculated, that's going to be your unweighted GPA. As a reminder, I mean, that's still the Hope Scholarship requirement. So even if I've lost my dual enrollment grant eligibility due to grades, I can still qualify for Hope based on either a 21 ACT or a final cumulative 3.0 high school GPA earned at the time of graduation. Let's go through the report. Again, you've logged into FAST, you click reports, you get to the screen that you saw earlier. So where is the dual enrollment grant report? Well, in this case, it's under the scholarship tab. So you will click scholarship, which will bring you to this page. And there is the dual enrollment grant status report. Once you click on that, that will open this screen. Now, folks, not to be confusing here, but right, dual enrollment grant, this is real time, meaning if your students are dual enrolling now, fall 21, or next semester, spring 22, what academic year must you plug in? That's right, the 21-22 academic year. You have a few different sort options. I'm going to encourage you to use the sort by last name option. And then once you have identified and selected 21-22 and alphabetical by last name, obviously you have other options there too. Click View Report, which will take us to this screen. You will again click the diskette to open up your file options. And if you want to save it to a PDF, there you go, save it to a PDF. Now, once you have opened, the PDF will be brought up there at the bottom of the screen. You will click it. Once that opens up, here's an example. Notice here, much like the Promise report, right? If you see a name for 21-22, that means they have successfully submitted the 21-22 dual enrollment grant application, whether it's for the traditional grant or the GIVE grant. Notice here, Ellen, Jana, Jason, Tracy, all are listed. That means they've submitted their grant application. Who's missing in this case? Well, Annie, Felicia. So obviously in this case, maybe they're taking a fall trimester course through a TCAT. So we still got time leading up to the November 1st fall trimester payment deadline to get Felicia or Annie applied for the dual enrollment grant. Or on the other hand, maybe Felicia's elected not to do dual enrollment this semester. Maybe she's waiting till next semester. Obviously, Felicia still has time to do the grant application before the February 1st 2-year, 4-year spring payment deadline. So again, bottom line, as you are having your students complete the 21-22 grant application, as they complete it, they will instantaneously appear on your application report that I just walked you through on how to find it within FAST system. One note, as you look through it, I think the other big thing about this report, beyond just looking for name, look at that application status. You know, if you see ineligible, then student right now is ineligible, at least in our system for the grant. Well, what does that mean? Well, it can mean a couple of things. It could mean that they're now ineligible based on GPA. But it could mean that they didn't answer a question on the application incorrectly. So what I would encourage, if you ever see ineligible, if you want to know what that means, reach out to your outreach specialist, reach out to Jana, right? Jana, I don't think you mind. And we can look that record up to just double check what's going on. Here over the last couple of weeks, I think one common thing Jana and I have both seen, you have students, there's a question on the grant application to ask, you know, have you completed the 10th grade? Well, some students, whether they're junior or senior, they maybe selected no, that they haven't. Well, that makes them ineligible, right? Why? Because you got to be a junior or senior. Another thing was, have you earned your diploma? And some students may have indicated yes, that they have earned their diploma and graduated high school. Again, this would cause ineligibility, right? Because once you graduate high school, you're no longer eligible. So those are some things that could lead to ineligibility. So I would encourage you to reach out to either your outreach specialist or Jana for more information. Jana, any question or any questions, anything else about the report or statuses, anything like that?
No, I did make a comment over in the chat, but just a very common issue for students not appearing on your report for dual enrollment is that they've listed the wrong high school. The high school list is a drop down box. The students a lot of times will use the scroll on the mouse instead of clicking out of it and then scrolling. So that does change the high school. So it's a very common issue for students not appearing on your report, and you know that they've done it. A lot of times they have put the wrong high school, and that is something that they would have to call into the call center to get corrected, or contact one of us. We can all make that correction.
Yeah, no, gotcha. Guys, that's actually my last slide. I actually want to look at something. And maybe it's my chat box that missed something here. I feel like I missed one thing. It may have been on this slide, and I apologize. Maybe I did. I just want to give a shout out right quick. With help from Jana, with help from the Pathways team, with help from a host of individuals, on the new College for TN website that just relaunched a week ago, that is where you will find your give course and program list, right? So if you use the QR code right here, this will open you to the dual enrollment resource page that was created for the relaunched College for TN website. And within that page, I think as you scroll down towards the middle, there's I want to say a fancy way of searching for the give eligible programs and courses offered by the TCATs and community colleges that you can select for your specific county or region that you work with. So that's what that QR code is for. And forgive me, earlier guys, it's funny, my view, I think the chat was covering up that QR code and I forgot to mention anything about it. I apologize, but FY, that is what that QR code leads you to there. So that said, let's go to the end. I think contact slides right quick. You know, we always want to give contact information. Here's Jana's. If you have any specific, oop, that was really fast. Jana's contact information. If you have any specific questions, her email, her phone number, and then lastly, you have my contact information as well as always, my email, my phone number, and then as always, you know, Felicia, Annie, they can post theirs into the chat. Again, from the team perspective, you guys most likely are receiving emails from your outreach specialist, so you got their contact information. So for anything we've covered today, you can always reach out to your outreach specialist for more information. So I'm going to stop sharing. Ladies, it's 11:01. I did pretty good, right? We covered that hour. We covered everything in that 60-minute allotted time. Any questions that you think we need to go over from a chat perspective? I know, Felicia, thank you so much for answering. Annie, thank you for answering some questions, and Jana as well. Anything we need to maybe go over? And just as a reminder, Annie, Felicia, if y'all are on mute, make sure you unmute yourselves if you want to talk.
You might just mention, like, for dual enrollment, the like consortium agreements again, just quickly, like, how do we know which school is going to do that? And so if I want to take more than one class at 2 different colleges, you know, how do I do that?
Yeah, Jenna, I'm going to let you tackle that if you don't mind.
So it can get real hairy where consortium agreements are concerned, because there could be 3. If a student is eligible for the additional courses, they could essentially take courses at 3 different institutions. So when the student submits a grant application, they can only submit with one institution listed, based on state regulations and F&A requirements. We can only pay one institution. So that's why consortium agreements are required, is that if a student is eligible for payment, then they are to get that payment. So whatever institution is listed on the application is considered to be the home institution, and then the other institution where the student is taking classes would be the host institution. Who plays home and who plays host? TSAC has no policy on that. TSAC has no specific guidance on that. There are some institutions that prefer to be home or host. We do leave that up to them, and it may require a student to do a change of institution on their application. Either way, again, the home institution is who we are literally going to send money to. So that's where the consortium agreements come into play. The student needs to initiate those agreements because Ball State and TCAT Hartsville aren't going to know necessarily that the student is somewhere else wanting payment. So that's why we do say that the student needs to initiate those agreements. And it is done through the financial aid offices. And what happens with the agreement is that the home institution will request all of the funds. And based on whatever their institutional policy is, the student may receive a refund for the additional courses that they are to turn around and pay the other institution's tuition. Or the home institution could pay the host institution directly. So that part of the process varies by institution and would be based on their policy. So that is something that the student would also need to check on with the home institution as well. Does that cover the consortium, Annie, or do I need to go into different detail or explain it differently?
As Annie pauses for a second, I'm going to jump in just for a second to Chrissy had a great question in the Q&A. Do homeschool students still have to live in Tennessee for 365 days? So Chrissy, this is something again, right? There's, when I say changes, obviously changes happen all the time, and I think it's good for us as a team to reiterate this. So, and Jana, you can chime in here as well. I believe at the beginning of the 2021 academic year, and so this is going back a year, there was a legislative change that where basically we align residency with TBR residency policy now. So for the quote 1 year rule for that our rule used to always say that you had to be a resident of Tennessee for 1 year before you were eligible for HOPE or eligible to receive the dual enrollment grant. We now defer to the college. So Jenna, again, chime in, but I mean, bottom line, if the college deems you in state for tuition purposes, then you can be eligible for grant, dual enrollment grant, for Hope Scholarship, for Tennessee Promise. Anything to add that?
So kind of the running joke of it is that that TSEC has gotten out of the business of determining Tennessee residency. So if the institution considers the student to be in state, like Jason said, for tuition purposes, then the student would be eligible based on that institution's policy.
The other one, and Felicia, you tackled this as well as mine. I just want to be clear, like Karen asked about, quote, when did these changes take place? And, obviously the word these can be loaded, right? Because the bills oftentimes had their own when they begin, right? Most of the bills that we recapped actually began, during the 21-22 academic year. As Felicia pointed out, specifically as it relates to the dual enrollment grant award amount changes, that is effective spring 22, specifically on January 1. And again, that PDF. Annie, I see your message and Katie may still be on right now. Katie, I do know I owe you an email, and I'll say this offline. I will respond to the email that I know I owe you a response on, and Jana, I'll CC you on it. Katie just had a general question about dual enrollment grant that I think might be best to just for us to email her offline about. So, anything else, guys? Anything else we see? I like this, Annie. One thing you or Felicia, I think both said, or in the chat, guys, if you're a new counselor, this is a lot of information, right? Among this group, what are we running on what 60 years of institutional knowledge about our programs, essentially, right? I mean, think about this, guys. Among the four of us, 60 years of institutional knowledge. And it took time to learn all the intricacies of HOPE and dual enrollment grant and Promise. And then when we got in the business of helping people with FAFSA, right? And there's still times that we lean on one another to answer your questions, right? Sometimes when you pose me a question, I've got to bounce it off, whether it's the team, whether it's Jana, whether it's somewhere else back at the agency. So if you are new, Felicia, Annie posted their contact information. You've got my contact information as well. We'd love to do a one-on-one here, like if we need to, in terms of teaching everything you need to know, or at least what you should know to get by. And then after time, layering more and more stuff on top of that over time. I would encourage you to continue joining these webinars. I know it's a lot to ask you to spend an hour, but again, these are recorded and they're going to be sent out, and you can go and look at them after the fact. And I think over the course of the semester, like we've done the past year, we're going to also do like little short videos as well on various topics, on various questions that you pose to also push that out to not only professionals, but for parents and students to consume our programs and everything. So
Hey Jason, if I can real quick, don't forget that Josh recorded some videos for FAST if you want to mention that.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned it, and not to be silly, but yeah, Josh did, and actually, guys, on the Concert 10 site, this was a resource that, again, and I hate to say, but we sent out earlier in the semester that linked you and pointed you back to the wonderful videos that Josh Moran and his team did, walking counselors through the FAST system. And so they're on the College for 10 website. And again, we can, that may be something as we send, Janet, to your point, as we send this recording out most likely next week, we can include the link to Josh's videos as a reminder, because yes, Josh's team did a fabulous job on those FAFS tutorial videos. But hopefully today was, what you need to know right now about FAST, you now know. And you've got 2 PDFs that walk you through that process. So, anyways, hopefully you've learned what you need to know about FAST, at least that's it. All right, guys. I love the team. I love Annie, Felicia, Jana. Thank you so much for joining me. I always I love that. Cameron, I wish you would see me at Scally. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend. However, you'll see Erica and Eric. So you'll see them, and you'll see our colleagues. I think Troy's going to be there. Troy Grant, Suzette Telly, I think is going to be there. So you'll see some of our other colleagues at Scally. So I wish I was there, but I'll be there in spirit. How about that? Well, if nothing else, guys, again, Felicia, Annie, Jana, thank you so much for joining us and joining me. And until next week, happy FAFSA season. Come next Friday. We're going to talk all about the 22-23 FAFSA. It's my Super Bowl season. That makes me a complete and utter dork, as my wife would say, because I love FAFSA this much. But next Friday, we're going to talk everything about the 22-23 FAFSA. Nothing huge from a change perspective, but definitely some new looking layout screens is the big takeaway I've seen thus far. So we will talk more about that next Friday. Until then, everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk later. See you guys.